economy and shows to the British people that politics can be a force for good, the vehicle for improving lives of millions, no matter who you voted for. Mr. Speaker, it's a day when we get on with the serious business of government. And yet a House with no time for levity would go against the grain of our traditions. So it's fantastic to hear my honourable friend, the member from Bootle, in such fine fettle today when proposing the humble address. He spoke with great passion, as he always does, for his constituency, famous, as he himself mentioned, for the Anthony Gormley sculptures on Crosby Beach. It's a work of art that's entitled Another Place, a collection of gently rusting figures for whom the tide is perpetually coming in. A solid grounding should he ever consider a career in the other place. But I'm sure this House will agree. He is also one of the warmest and most generous members. A generosity that, ahead of a previous election, extended to an offer to hand-deliver Conservative leaflets, a commitment to the democratic process that should be applauded, not least because it resulted in a stonking increase in his majority for Labour. But, Mr. Speaker, as anyone who knows my honourable friend will confirm, while he does like to relax with a glass of wine and listen to Engelbert Humperdinck, for him, family always comes first. And the Leader of the Opposition referred to his daughter. And growing up, he was cared for by his 4 sisters. And now he is never happier than when he's with his grandchildren, who are convinced that he knows Mary Poppins personally, a belief I note he has never discouraged. He has been a tremendous servant to our family, the Labour family, and we thank him for his outstanding speech today. Mr. Speaker, the address was seconded by the honourable friend, the member for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green, a fitting tribute for a royal occasion, as I'm told she is known as Queen Flo on Instagram. The House will know her as a tireless champion for her community, as well as a founding member of one of our most vital affiliates, the Labour Friends of Karaoke. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I'm reliably told that Queen Flo does mean Queen Bee, which we look forward to hearing at Labour conference. But, Mr. Speaker, truly it was a fantastic speech. Another demonstration that my honourable friend is a shining example of our movement. A young carer when growing up, a fighter for their causes on AIDS and HIV, on the health inequalities which still deliver poorer outcomes for black women, and on sickle cell, which her late mum suffered from. I know what it's like to watch your mum move in and out of hospital as a child, and so I respect and admire the way she now champions young people from poorer households and fights for the opportunities that they deserve. Perhaps most powerfully of all, she's spoken about her own experience arriving at the scene of a stabbing, and has rightly demanded that we never allow ourselves to become desensitised to the tragedy of knife crime. As a fellow in a London MP, I know how much this is hurting our city, as it is towns and cities across the country. I know how much potential is lost and how many families fear that their child could be next. So be under no doubt, turning the tide on this violence is absolutely central, a key mission that this government of service will take on. Mr. Speaker, both speeches were in the finest traditions of this House. Let me also follow the Leader of the Opposition and mark the passing of our colleagues in the traditional way, because since the last gracious address, the Labour Party has lost a stalwart of our movement with the passing of Tony Lloyd. who served in 36 years of distinction the communities of Rochdale, Manchester Central and Stretford. I had the chance to speak to Tony just days before he left us. That was when he was leaving hospital to go home, and he knew it was for the last time and that he wouldn't see a day like this. And without being partisan, I can tell you he would have loved to see the house set up as it is today. He would have told us, using his experience, to use every precious moment that we have to serve those communities that he held so dear, because that is what he stood for, the best of our movement, a champion of politics as a force for good. And Mr. Speaker, that is the great test of our times. The fight for trust is the battle that defines our political era. And it's a task not just for this government, but for the whole Parliament. We are all responsible for the tone and standards that we set. And I want to thank the Right Honourable Gentleman in every exchange that we've had since the election. And in his words today, he has gone well beyond the usual standards of generosity, and I thank him for that. And in that spirit, this King's Speech picks up some of the important business not concluded in the last session. And so, on football governance and the reduction of smoking, we hope to proceed in a manner that recognises the previous consensus. We will also carry forward the Holocaust Memorial Bill. So we build that memorial next to this Parliament and make sure every generation reaffirms our commitment to never again. And we will also honour the promises that I made and the Leader of the Opposition made to the family of Martin Hett and all the families affected by the horrific events in Manchester that day. Figan Murray, Martin's mum, walked 200 miles to tell us that Britain needs that law quickly. I told her then that she would get that from a Labour government, and we honour that promise today, and I'm very grateful for the indication of the cross-party support we will have on that very important provision. Because the security of the British people is the most fundamental priority of any government. And whether our fight is against terrorists, the vile criminal smuggling gangs that weaken our borders, or foreign powers which threaten the security of this nation, we will leave no stone unturned when it comes to keeping the British people safe. And we will recognise the bravery of those on the front line of keeping us safe, with a new Armed Forces Commissioner. That's not just a name or a role, but a strong and independent champion for those who have committed to the ultimate service, as a way we can show our respect. We will also move quickly on the lessons from the infected blood scandal that the House debated in almost the final act of the last session. A day when we undertook, all of us, a solemn responsibility, not just to deliver justice to those people, but also to take on the work of prevention, to make sure that those lessons shape the future of public service in our country. Because scandals like infected blood, Windrush, Horizon, Hillsborough are united not just by the scale of the injustice, but also by the indignity that the victims and their families have been put through, merely for standing up for truth and justice. So it is high time to bring in a duty of candour, the Hillsborough Law, because a government of service must also be a government of accountability and justice. That is what service means. Yes, I will.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way during his excellent speech, outlining the hope and renewal within this King's Speech, much needed in constituencies like mine, in Luton North, where over 45% of children are growing up in relative poverty. What reassurances can the Prime Minister give me and my constituents that he personally takes this issue very seriously and that his government will address it?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, and I give my assurance to her and to the whole House that I do take child poverty extremely seriously. I'm proud of the record of the last Labour government in reducing child poverty. It clearly had a strategy, and we will have a strategy, and I'm very pleased to have announced today the task force that will lead our strategy to reduce child poverty. No child should be growing up in poverty. And we will work across the House on that issue, and I will take an intervention.
Very grateful thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way on his newly announced task force, which of course Beth Rigby was announcing on Twitter as we were all within this chamber. Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister outline how many children will remain in poverty whilst that task force undertakes the work, which will ultimately lead to the same conclusion we are proposing, to scrap the two-child benefit cap?
Well, look, I do welcome this. I know this is an issue across the whole House. I don't think there's a single member that doesn't care about child poverty. The point of the task force is to devise a strategy, as we did last in government, to drive those numbers down. It can't be a single issue. It's across a number of strands, and we will work with people across the House in order to do it. What matters is the commitment to do it and to drive those numbers down. That is what we did last in government, and we will do it again. But, Mr. Speaker, I'll just make some progress and then I will. Mr. Speaker, whilst I respect the tone of the Leader of the Opposition's contribution, I can't stop my mind wandering back to 9 months ago when he was at this dispatch box. His great political hero, Nigel Lawson, once said, "To govern is to choose." And every day serving the people of this country is a chance to make a difference for them. Yet, Mr. Speaker, the last King's speech was the day when the veil of his choices slipped. And we all saw a party, his party, content to let our country's problems fester, content to push aside the national interest, as they focused almost entirely on trying to save their own skins. Mr. Speaker, we will have time over the weeks, months and years to debate the measures in this King's speech and the choices of this government. But I defy anyone on those benches or elsewhere to look at the ambition and purpose of our intent and not to receive a return to the serious business of government. No more wedge issues. No more gimmicks, no more party political strategy masquerading as policy. This is an agenda focused entirely on delivering for the people of this country. Legislation for the national interest that seeks only to fix our foundations and make people better off. Solve problems, not exploit them. Because, I'll just make some progress in the work. Because, Mr. Speaker, with each day that passes, my government is finding new and unexpected marks of their claim. Scars of the last 14 years where politics was put above the national interest. Decline deep in the marrow of our institutions. We've seen that in our prisons, writ large. We've seen it in our rivers and seas, even worse than we thought. And we've seen it in our councils, pushed to the brink by the previous government, now unable even to deliver basic services to children with special educational needs. And, Mr. Speaker, we've already taken first steps on so many of the priorities we put before the British people. The work of change has begun, but we know, as they do, that national renewal is not a quick fix. The rot of 14 years will take time to repair. Nonetheless, I will give way.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and he talks about priorities. Well, of course, people in rural communities around the country see the vast majority which the Right Honourable Gentleman has assembled, and they're afraid. They see a manifesto in which just 87 words are used about farming. They see a king king's speech. They see a king's speech with no mention of rural communities or rural priorities. Will the Prime Minister please take this opportunity to reassure people in rural and farming communities that his Labour government will take notice of them?
Prime Minister, just to say, look, intervention one thing, but to actually make a speech is not the best time to do it. Prime Minister.
Well, let me take this opportunity to reassure those in rural communities. I grew up in a rural community myself, and I think that if you look at the places that are now represented on these benches, you'll see the reassurance that has been given that will also be given again. The King's speech we have brought to this House today is a marker of our intent, not only a certain destination for the future of this country, but a new way of governing, a government of service, guided by clear missions, with a long-term plan to fix the foundations, a plan which starts, as it must, with our economy. Under his watch, the last Parliament was the first in modern history to leave living standards in a worse place than they found them. The consequence not just of Tory irresponsibility, but of a more pervasive inability to face the future. A ducking of the hard choices. Eyes fixed always on the horse trading of Westminster politics. I will in a moment. Rather than the long-term national interest. Mr. Speaker, we don't just turn the page on that today, we close the door on it forever. A budget responsibility bill that will protect the living standards of working people from the chaos they endured under the last government. A commitment, no matter how fierce the storms, to economic stability as the foundation we build on. That is a changed Labour Party at work. And then on that foundation, we take the brakes off Britain, go further and faster on measures to generate higher economic growth. Workers and business, united in the cause of wealth creation. We will reform the planning rules, a choice ignored for 14 years, to build the homes and infrastructure that Britain needs. We will level up rights at work, a choice ignored for 14 years, to deliver security and dignity at work. We will create a new industrial strategy, invest in cleaner, cheaper British energy, harness the power of artificial intelligence, improve our public transport, confront our historic challenges on technical education, transform our skills agenda in partnership with business, and push forward devolution to the cities, regions and councils of England. A plan for wealth creation that will finally lead us out of the pay more, get less doom loop. That is their legacy. And let me be clear, we will work with anyone invested in the future of our country. I've said, I'll just complete this. I said that we would serve everyone, whether they voted for us or not. And I meant it. So let me say directly to the benches opposite, if you're invested in the success of your community, we will work with you. This is a new era. We are turning the page. We're turning politics to service. Because that is what the people of this country want to see from their politicians. And service is a stronger bond than political self-interest. That is what country first means. The only way we can restore trust, and the reason this government of service was elected. Mr. Speaker, we were also elected to repair our public services with investment and reform, to make them once again beacons of justice for the communities that they serve. A signal to our country of the cause that fires national renewal. My determination for everyone in our country, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, no matter where they started in life, to feel that success belongs to them. It is a cause, Mr. Speaker, that I do believe unites this House and indeed the people of this great nation. So I will.
Mr Speaker, can I commend the Prime Minister? There are many within this House, both sides of this chamber, both in opposition but also in your party, who welcome your election as Prime Minister and look forward to the delivery of some feel-good factors for all of this great nation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Always better together, is what I always say, and even those in the chamber who maybe have different ideas perhaps think the same as well. Prime Minister, in the paper, of my provincial paper 2 weeks ago, we recognise that Northern Ireland was very much part of your 10-year plan. Can I ask the Prime Minister, can he perhaps outline exactly what that plan will be for Northern Ireland to ensure our position will never weaken and always get stronger?
Can I just say, Jim, you'll be definitely bottom of the list, but don't worry. Prime Minister.
I'm grateful for that intervention. It was very important to me and to my government that within days of being elected, I went to Scotland, to Northern Ireland and Wales with the message that I did about working together. As he will know, I worked in Northern Ireland for 5 years on reforms to the police service in Northern Ireland. It matters to me that we make progress on all matters across all of our nations, and that is the way that we will operate as a government. That was a statement of intent going as I did in those early days, and I will continue in that vein in direct answer to his question. Mr Speaker, so as well as our plan to cut waiting times, we will modernise the Mental Health Act and finally drag it into the 21st century. And we will raise standards in our schools, improve the confidence, the well-being and the happiness of our children, because that is so often the barrier that holds them back. We will also work on landmark legislation on race equality, tackle the structural injustice of unfair discriminatory pay. Now, Britain has come a long way on matters like this. One look at this Parliament shows that we're moving forward. And I recognise the efforts of so many in this House, on all sides, to tackle this injustice. But, Mr Speaker, we can still do more, and therefore we must, and we will. We will also begin work on banning conversion practices and bring forward tough new protections for renters. Promises that have lingered in the lobby of good intentions for far too long. And, Mr Speaker, we will signal our intent to transform society with measures on crime and justice that will not only rid our streets of antisocial behaviour, but also launch a new mission to reduce violence against women and girls by 50%. In this, we're inspired by the work of unbelievable campaigners: Mina Smallman, Claire Waxman, Melanie Brown, and my friends, John and Penny Clough. Mr Speaker, I will never forget the day that John and Penny came to my office and told me what they had been through just to get justice for their daughter, Jane, murdered in the car park of the Blackpool Hospital where she worked by the man awaiting trial on multiple charges of raping her. I gave them my word then that I would do what I could, not just for John and Penny and Jane, but for all the Johns, Pennies and Janes in our country. Mr Speaker, it's an enormous undertaking. I wish it wasn't, but it is. Just listen to the contribution made every year in this House by my honourable friend, the member for Birmingham Yardley. A grim reminder of just how many women are killed every year by domestic violence. And yet, as everybody who works in public service knows, government can make or break a life. I've seen it myself as a public servant. I also know from those campaigners what service can do when it listens and empowers people far beyond the walls of the state. So, Mr Speaker, this is how we will go about our business: mission-driven, focused on ambitious goals, bringing together the best of our country, committed to the practical difference, big and small, that we can make together. That is the reward and the hope of service, the business of change, and the work of this government of service that we will take on. We will stop the chaos, fix our foundations, and take the brakes off Britain. A King's Speech that returns politics to serious government, that returns government to public service and that returns public service to the interests of working people. That is the path of national renewal, the rebuilding of our country, and we take another step today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I now call the leader of the... Order! Please, let's show respect to each other. Let's not set off on the bad foot, we want to be on the right foot. I now call the leader of the Lib Dems, Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on behalf of the Liberal Democrats, I want to add our sincere thanks to His Majesty King Charles for his gracious speech, and like other party leaders, wish him to continue on his recovery, and also join them in sending our best returns, happy returns on the birthday of Her Majesty. And as we remember members who were killed in service and condemn the appalling assassination attempts on President Trump, we should all commit ourselves to a new politics where we respect, where we disagree with respect, and we listen to each other, and we try to bring the dialogue on politics in our country together from the divisions we've seen. And can I join others in paying tribute to the late Tony Lloyd? He had many campaigns and many issues that he championed in this House. I had the huge privilege of joining him on an all-party trip to Israel and Gaza, because one of his commitments was to peace in the Middle East, for justice for the Palestinians and for a two-state solution. And let us all commit ourselves to that again. And I would also like to pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable members for Bootle and Vauxhall and Camberwell Green for their accomplished speeches, proposing and seconding the loyal address. I know the member for Bootle comes from a political family. He explained that in some detail, and I believe his great-uncle Peter, once the Labour MP for Preston South, later became a Liberal councillor in Liverpool. So may I say to the honourable gentleman, if he does follow in his great-uncle's footsteps, he won't be the first in his family to see the Liberal light, and our door is always open. The honourable member for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green made an impressive mark in her first Parliament as she campaigned on things like knife crime, on the NHS and on housing, and also spoke very eloquently on an issue that's close to her heart and mine, care. She spoke movingly about how she cared for her mum when she was just a very young child, learning at a young age about all the different painkillers needed to treat her mum. And as someone who believes we need to hear the voice of carers in this chamber far more often, it was a pleasure to listen to her speech today, and I'm left in no doubt that she will make an even bigger mark in her second Parliament. Yeah. And while I'm paying tribute, Mr. Speaker, let me add our thanks to the Three Lions, who captivated the whole nation and came so agonisingly close to ending all those years of hurt. They did us proud, and let's hope the Lionesses will retain their European crown next year. And so may I welcome the Prime Minister to his place and congratulate him and his party on their election victory. As he says, they now have an enormous undertaking, and we wish them well. I read somewhere that the Prime Minister apparently surfed to power on a wave of Conservative failure. But can I say to him gently, with a pang of envy, water sports are my thing. But Mr. Speaker, the challenge awaiting this new government are certainly great, and set against that challenging backdrop, there is much to welcome in the programme set out today. Not least the government's focus on getting our economy growing strongly again. And the Prime Minister is right to say that building more homes is an essential part of that, as you can see from the work of many brilliant Liberal Democrat councils, from Cumbria to Eastleigh, and in my own area, the Royal Borough of Kingston. The best way to build the many extra homes we need, especially those extra social and affordable homes, is to properly engage local people and communities and bring them along with you. And that is the community-led approach that we on these benches will continue to champion. Very happy to give way.
I'm delighted to see that the leader of the Liberal Democrats seems to be openly advocating the work of Eastleigh Borough Council. Could I just remind him that that council is only building double the number of houses required because his party leadership has got them into £800 million worth of debt to pay off the debts that they accrued?
Well, I'm delighted to say that today we welcome the new honourable member for Eastleigh to the Liberal Democrat benches, and I'm sure she will have all the answers the honourable gentleman needs. But growth and house building are not the only challenges, crucial though they are. I'm sure all of us across the House, as we knocked on doors during the election campaign, heard the same from so many people, a common refrain from people of all backgrounds and all walks of life, that nothing seems to be working as it should. From the health and care crisis to the sewage scandal to the cost of living, the British people have overwhelmingly rejected the past out-of-touch Conservative government that has gone. But after so many years of being taken for granted, many people have simply lost faith in our political system to solve their problems. So we on these benches do recognise the scale of the challenge now facing the new government. They have a big job to do, and so do we. We work hard on behalf of our constituents. We will scrutinise the government's plans carefully and strive to improve them. And, Mr. Speaker, we will oppose them when we think they've got it wrong. Absolutely. But where they act in the national interest to solve these problems and improve people's lives, we will support them. One issue came up more than any other on door after door, and I'm sure it's the same for members in all parties: the issue of health and care. Patients waiting weeks to see a GP or an NHS dentist, if they could find one. More than 6 million people waiting on NHS waiting lists. Tens and thousands of cancer patients waiting months to start urgent treatment. Patients stuck in hospital, ready to leave, wanting and waiting to leave, sometimes for weeks, but unable to, because the care home place wasn't there. The care worker, the support for the family carer wasn't in place. And, Mr. Speaker, fixing this crisis in our NHS is essential, not only for people's health and well-being, but also for our economy, for growth. Only if we get people off these waiting lists and into work can we get our economy growing strongly again. I have to give way.
He mentions the delays and the waiting side in NHS social care. So how much does he regret his role in the 5 years he spent in coalition with the Conservatives creating that situation?
Well, I do really disappointed in the honourable gentleman's intervention, because we could all go back to things that other parties did in government and say that they were wrong. And I would just say to the honourable gentleman, I come to this task now in a spirit of constructive opposition to work through for the best for our country, and I hope he and other members will too. And it's why I welcome in the King's speech a number of measures for the NHS, for reducing waiting times, and particularly on mental health. We want to work with the government to improve those. They are long overdue. But I would also urge the government, of course, to look at the proposals in our manifesto on the NHS, boosting GP numbers so that everyone can get an appointment within 7 days or 24 hours if it's urgent, improving access to dentists and, crucially, to local pharmacists too. Because if more people can get the care they need early and locally, fewer people go into hospital. Giving cancer patients the care they deserve with a cast-iron guarantee that they will start treatment within 2 months after diagnosis. This is the scale of the ambition we need, Mr. Speaker, for our NHS right now, and I hope the government will show it. But there is another part of this crisis that needs to be fixed, and it needs urgent attention, and that's care. I spoke about my own caring journey during the election, first for my mum when I was a teenager, then for my dear Nana, and now as Emily and I care for our severely disabled son, John. And Mr. Speaker, I've been incredibly touched by the response from colleagues from across the House who've reached out to tell me how important it is that we speak out on care. For people who need care and for their carers, both professional social care workers and for family carers, people looking after their loved ones. I've had the chance to hear from carers all over the country, of all ages, as they shared their personal stories with me. Like the couple who care for a son with similar care needs to John, who reached out to say they know what it's like to worry about what happens when you're no longer there to look after your disabled son. And they offered me advice. I was so touched by their kindness and generosity. Mr. Speaker, each care story is so different, and yet in many ways they have much in common. We all share in the special, wonderful bond we have with the ones we care for, and we all share in that feeling like no one else understands us. Caring has been in the shadows for far too long. Let this be the Parliament when carers' voices are heard, when we become the caring nation. Because caring is actually people doing extraordinary things every day for the ones they love, often in the face of difficult circumstances, physical challenges, no breaks, mountains of paperwork, countless appointments, endless phone calls, trying to navigate a broken system that is simply not designed to work for carers. So we on these benches will do our very best to get a fair deal for carers, whether on issues like carers allowance or the big challenge of fixing social care, so that our loved ones get the support they need when and where they need it. Now this, of course, will not be easy, Mr. Speaker. After years of neglect, fixing social care will be incredibly complicated, but we cannot shy away from it. So, although it wasn't in the King's speech today, I'm encouraged by reports the government is planning a cross-party commission on social care. We urgently need that to find a solution that will stand the test of time. So I hope we'll hear more about that from the government very soon. Fixing social care is essential, not just to give people the care and dignity they deserve, to support family carers, but also to fix our NHS. Without it, we can't. Now, if health and care was the only major crisis facing the government, that would be a big enough task. But clearly it's not. Inflation may have finally come down to normal levels, but the cost of living crisis persists. Families and pensioners are still facing record energy bills, sky-high housing costs and food bills. They need support and understanding, and that begins with the government's promise to be fiscally responsible. It would mark a big and welcome shift from the previous government's rather reckless approach to the budget. But with energy bills forecast to rise by 10% in October, clearly we need bold action to bring costs down, from home insulation to expanding renewable power. Liberal Democrats have a proud record of investing in renewable power, almost quadrupling it when we ran energy policy. And our policy drove the cost of renewable electricity below fossil fuel generated power. So I hope this government will act with the same level of ambition to tackle not only the cost of living crisis, but climate change too. Because urgent action is needed now to prevent catastrophic climate change. And we've shown how it can be done. And that, if you do it well, it benefits consumers, the economy and the environment too. So we welcome the focus the government has placed on this challenge, and we will push them to meet it. As we will when it comes to another environmental challenge, ending the sewage crisis. The election campaign showed clearly, for anyone who still doubted, the strength of public anger about the pollution being put into our rivers, into our lakes and onto our beaches. The government has made some initial welcome noises about holding the water companies to account, about making sure they put these environmental issues before profit. But we on these benches will be pushing ministers to act as quickly and decisively as possible to put an end to this appalling scandal. Health and care, the cost of living, climate change, sewage, these are big crises that just got worse and worse over the last years of the last government. And that government's failure to address them is a big part of why people's trust in politics is so low. This year's British Social Attitudes Survey found that 45% of people, 45%, almost never trust the government to put the national interest first, a record high. I'm sure I speak for everyone in the House when I hope this government will prove that wrong. But restoring public trust and confidence in our politics is a major task for us all, right across this House, no matter our party. And I think there are two parts of how we restore that trust. The first is by tackling the root causes of so many scandals that have caused so much harm and done so much damage to public trust, from Hillsborough to Horizon to infected blood. We therefore welcome the promised Hillsborough law with its statutory duty of candour on public officials. But we would urge the government to go further in this area. Given the vital role that whistleblowers have played in exposing these scandals, can I urge ministers to look at our proposals for stronger protections for whistleblowers, including a new office of the whistleblower? The second way to restore trust is by transforming our politics so it is relevant, engaging and responsive to people's needs and to their dreams. The measures that the government have promised to strengthen democratic rights and participation are therefore welcome. Also welcome is the principle of shifting more power out of Westminster and Whitehall so local decisions are made by the people for them and the communities they live in. But I'm sure the Prime Minister will know that the devil is in the detail, so we will scrutinise these plans carefully when they come. We fear they won't go far enough, for it won't surprise anyone in this House, Mr. Speaker, to hear that we on these benches believe that political reform must include electoral reform. Proportional representation, giving everyone equal power to hold members of Parliament properly to account, and maybe even the Conservatives support that these days. And I note that according to the same social attitude survey, a majority of the public agree with us. Mr. Speaker, I've focused on many big domestic challenges facing us, but I want to conclude by touching on the enormous, challenging international picture too. From Vladimir Putin's appalling war in Ukraine to the dreadful conflict in Israel and Gaza, with the terrible humanitarian catastrophe there and hostages still being held by Hamas, these are tumultuous times indeed. They demand that we work together with our allies through international institutions. And yes, that means working constructively with our European neighbours. To rebuild the ties of trust, trade and friendship with our European friends, so badly damaged by the Conservatives. As Liberals, we believe that the UK can be an incredible force for good when we stand tall on the world stage, championing the vital British values of democracy, liberty, human rights and the rule of law. So when the government does that, they will have our full support. Mr. Speaker, I would like to close by paying tribute to those on the front lines of that effort, our armed forces deployed around the world, whether securing NATO's flanks in Eastern Europe, combating Daesh terrorists in the Middle East, or supporting peacekeeping missions in Africa. They serve our country with incredible courage and professionalism, and we all owe them an eternal debt.
Dave Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman, the member for Kingston and Surbiton, but I have to confess...
OK, and you're joining us now on the Martin Daubney Show. It's 4:15 almost. This is the debate on the King's speech, picking up with our political editor in the studio, Christopher Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. So, Rishi Sunak was very magnanimous in defeat, very charming, very generous, seemed very relaxed. Maybe now power has been taken from his shoulders. Seems to agree with most of the stuff stuff that Sir Keir Starmer has put forward. And I wonder, actually, if that's the point. It feels like a King's Speech full of bills that could have been Conservative.
Martin, great to be on the show again with you. There's 40 bills or draft bills. I reckon 1 in 4 would have found their way in some form into a Conservative Party King's Speech, a 5th term of Tory government. We're not going to see that. Labour won the election. But I just wonder whether... To me, is this what Labour activists have been waiting 14 years for? I mean, where's the radicalism? You have got measures in here, notably on workers' rights, day one rights to sick pay, to paternity pay, that kind of thing. That's great for big companies, but small companies might think, well, can I afford to hire somebody? What might happen, as happens in some parts of the continental Europe, is you don't want to hire people on normal contracts because you can't afford the other bits that come with them. So we may stop people getting proper jobs if they're young people. That could be a problem. I just wonder where is the real ambition? Where's the moment where you go, wow, you know, that's rubbing the Tories' face in it?
Yeah, and I wonder if it feels like, you know, this getting politics back on track, it felt more like making politics boring again.
Yeah.
Without, you know, we just got rid of Gareth Southgate. Do you think in many ways Sir Keir Starmer feels a bit like the Gareth Southgate manager now of politics? He was kind of very well-meaning, but we were waiting for that oomph, waiting for the big sort of firework in the box, and it didn't seem to come.
That's not really who he is, though, is it? I mean, that's not who Keir Starmer is. I mean, in the sense that there's more excitement around the Blair government in '97, and of course this is comparable in number of seats won. Essentially, he's stuck with what was in the manifesto. He hasn't gone much further than that. In some areas, he's withdrawn from that on peerages. He's getting rid of hereditary peerages, but not ditching peers over the age of 80, perhaps worried about how that looks for people like Alf Dubs, very respectable peer in his 90s. I wonder if they have pulled back in some parts of this. They have almost not gone as far as they would. And there are areas in it which I find quite baffling. There's the Northern Ireland legacy legislation. They're going to repeal protections for members of the armed forces who were being prosecuted for deaths during the Troubles. And it looks like, reading the notes around this King's Speech, they may start the prosecutions again. And that's not really where Sir Keir Starmer, the man of the veterans, a man who was on D-Day, not where many of us thought he was. And that's a surprise to me.
That actually was a policy of Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, I campaigned in the 2019 election, and that position, the historical pursual of veterans, particularly in Northern Ireland, was such a strong sentiment against the Labour Party. Veterans were putting signs on their doors saying, warning, veteran lives here, Labour Party don't knock. This is back to those days, pursuing people for historical wrongdoings many, many decades ago.
It does seem that way, and we'll wait to see the actual detail. We've got 103 pages in this extensive document here explaining what's in the King's Speech from the government. I've counted up the numbers of the word Brexit being used, Martin. I know you're familiar with the Brexit Party. 6 times in the last King's Speech used by the Tory government, not a single mention of Brexit in this document, 15 mentions of the European Union. I wonder, Martin, is Brexit a dirty word?
It's don't mention the war, I think. It's don't mention the war because everybody's looking for a backpedal on Brexit from this government. A lot of people feel that this cozying up to Brussels, we saw at the NATO summit, meeting with the German Chancellor, with the Swedish Premier, with the Dutch Premier, already positioning, already been on a charm offensive to Brussels on the Eurostar, the old free fizz, no doubt flowing well. On a serious point, they both, Mr Sunak and Mr Starmer today, both noted Donald Trump, the assassination attempt. We must not go to those politics over here. Violence has no place in politics, they both said. Sir Keir Starmer, I thought, movingly looked at the Joe Cox memorial plaque, which he was able to see for the first time as the Prime Minister, looking over. But then he went on to...
Well, if I may, just on that, he did actually, the introduction from the Prime Minister to the King's Speech, sorry to interrupt you, Martin, he did attack what he calls the snake oil charm of populism. He said about
to make that point.
Forgive me, sorry, Martin, but that may sound seductive, but it drives us into a dead end of further division and greater disappointment. His target isn't really Rishi Sunak. No one thinks he's a real populist. No. He's going after Liz Truss and Boris Johnson.
And Nigel Farage.
And obviously Nigel Farage now an MP, and we look forward to hearing from him in the King's Speech debate at some point in the MP for Clacton. But, yeah, no question. I mean, I think that they clearly are seeing that they define themselves. Change for this government is not being populist.
And there was consensus on the smoking ban. They agree on that. Consensus.
Tory policy.
Yeah, Tory policy. Consensus on NATO and the continued giving of money
Martin's
to Ukraine.
Law, Hill's bill, I think, was looked at by the Tory government, certainly. All sorts of areas where you might expect a Tory government to do it. I mean, there are left-wing things happening here. You've got the gradual renationalisation of railways. That's interesting.
Yes.
The planning bill is something which I think any government would have to have done. The last Tory government surrendered to the backbench pressure of the NIMBY brigade, to use that term. But this government is a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard, they say. But wait till that policy comes into contact with communities around the country, and we'll see how long it lasts for, because it'll be difficult, I think, for this government.
And one thing that really leapt out there was this new draft bill, legislation of equal pay for people of colour. This could be a can of worms. Chris, we saw a similar notion bankrupt at Birmingham City Council. The gender pay recognition bill there cost them many, many tens of millions. Could this be an awful can of worms where you'd have a grievance in every boardroom in every company in Britain where people demanding equal pay on the lines of what? It's already illegal.
Well, it could. Well, it could do. Let's break down. Let's break down what it is. It's a draft equality (brackets race and disability bill). What that means is it won't happen in the next 2 years before the next King's Speech. It's a draft bill. They are committing to publishing the bill. What that means is, I think, they are expecting a big row about it. The policy is they are trying to mirror measures in the Equality Act 2010, which forces big companies employing over, I think it's 250 people, I think that's right, to publish what men and women are paid. And if there's a gender pay gap, to own up to it and address it. Now, what that doesn't happen so far in the cases of those people of colour and people who are disabled, and they want to equalise that. That's what they want to do, but they recognise it could trigger what you're describing, and that's the concern, and that's why it's a draft bill. Let's see where it lands and see if it's in the next King's Speech in 2 years' time.
But with such a massive majority, this is an early indicator of the precise kind of laws that could just get pushed through with little opposition. Ed Davey there said, I won't oppose Labour purely for the sake of it.
Exactly what Sunak says.
Yeah, so
these people are paid money. Well, my point about Rishi Sunak is all very well saying that. And I said to you yesterday, I've talked to MPs who have got PTSD, post-traumatic Sunak disorder. They want this guy to show a bit of fight. He may be leader of the opposition until I expect October, November, when the new leader takes over. But he's getting 50 grand per annum to be a leader of the opposition. Do it, please, Rishi, is what the Tories will be saying. Good words, Chris Oak. Thanks for joining us. We'll come back to you throughout the show. But let's moving on to another story now in today's King's Speech, and it's this. Foreign criminals will be deported as part of the government's drive to ease the prison crisis. Around 12% of inmates in British jails are foreign nationals, and a bill mentioned in the King's Speech will see prisoners serving part of their sentences in their home country. Other offenders could be thrown out of the UK altogether. Well, I'm joined now by the human rights lawyer, Shahab Khan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Martin. Thanks.
Welcome to the show, Mr. Khan. What do you make of this? This sounds like a Conservative-style policy, kick foreign criminals out of the country, but won't it be human rights lawyers like you that stop this happening?
Yes, it does sound pretty conservative, which, I guess goes to show that there's not much that the Tories actually set out to do that they achieved. Obviously, I don't know how much, if the prisons weren't at breaking point as they are now, whether Labour would have introduced such a policy otherwise, or whether they're just being forced to do that. But other than that, of course, I think we have to look at very carefully the human rights aspects of this, the humanitarian aspects of this. Of course, these are people we're talking about. They're not commodities. It's not they're not just objects where we think, we have too many of them. There's not enough. Let's, deport them, send them to another country. Let's export them. The whole point is, they might have set up family lives here, private lives here, been in the UK for so many years. So, of course, I think that's a very important part of the balancing exercise, as known, and that has to be carefully considered.
Well, Mr. Khan, I'm smiling here, not to be patronising, but because I suspect the Labour Party will be facing precisely the same barriers that the Conservative Party faced with their Rwanda bill, and that is human rights lawyers, the European Court of Human Rights stepping in to prevent government policy, even when it appears to be common sense. And what chance do you think we have of removing a drug dealer, say, from Albania, when it took more than 8 years to extradite hate preacher Abu Hamza al-Maskari, Captain Hook, who had 14 terrorism charges against him? There's no chance of such policy becoming actually enacted, is there? So long as the human rights of criminals, they supersede the human rights of British citizens.
I mean, obviously, why would they supersede that? That's, I mean, to be honest, with all due respect, that's utter nonsense, isn't it? They supersede, that's the whole point. Human rights for everyone. Every human has their rights. The point is, I mean, it just depends. Now, I'm British. I'm in the UK. I'm in no danger of being deported from this country. And therefore, you know, someone else who is in danger of that, obviously, their human rights is what we have to consider in that case. So, of course, it's the human rights of the criminals, if you like, or the offenders. But we have to look, and some parts, you know, I think are particularly objectionable or concerning. Like, for instance, instead of prosecuting, and once someone's arrested, potentially charged, then, you know, they will be given the option or they will be deported without being prosecuted and even sentenced. Which I mean, to me at least, I mean, we've not seen the details yet. I think that's completely unacceptable. Why would that be the case? I mean, we don't start to punish...
Okay. Well, let's look at a potential test case then. So the King's Speech today proposes that, say, for example, a rapist from who was born overseas is serving, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years for rape in Britain, and the government policy says, OK, you are going back to your home country, because that's now the government policy. Would you, as a human rights lawyer, step in and say, no, this rapist has human rights, we're going to make sure he doesn't get deported back to his country, and damn the victim?
Well, I mean, those are four completely different points. You mean, firstly, the rapist has human rights. Yes, he's a human. So, of course, he has rights.
So you would?
The victim has victim's rights. Of course, those rights are there. But the main point is, what is he being deported for? Why is he being, what will happen to him in his home country? Is he going to complete a sentence there, or will he just roam the streets there? Because if he's going to roam the streets there, I think...
The legislation is very clear, Mr. Khan. The legislation is very clear. If you're in prison now and you're a foreign criminal, say you're a rapist, and you meet the criteria, then you'll be sent back to your home country and finish the rest of your sentence there. What's wrong about that? That's a reasonable use of government time, is it not?
Yeah, so what's wrong about that is that we don't know. Does he have family here? Does he have a wife? Does he have children? Does he have a British wife? Does he have British children here? So, of course, just as that happens with any British person who's committed rape, you go to prison, you serve your time, hopefully you're rehabilitated, hopefully the government is doing enough to actually, make you a better person.
And hopefully you won't come out and reoffend and rape somebody else in Britain again. But isn't the point? This law would send criminals back to their home country, and many, many people, now including the Labour government. Now, this is not some far-right crackpot idea. This is the Labour Party proposition to send dangerous foreign criminals back to their home country, and you're saying you'd oppose it.
I'm not saying I would oppose it. I'm saying every case is different. The point is, if he has 3 British children and a British wife, and he's going to be released in 3.5 years, I think those children have a right to be with the father in 4 years. Once he served his time, just as we do with any British citizen. We don't, lock them up forever. You can never see your children again. Depends where we're sending them.
But there's a fundamental difference, Mr. Khan. There's a fundamental difference. If somebody is released from prison and they're a British citizen, then, of course, their place is on the streets of Britain. This is a fundamental difference. If you're a foreign dangerous criminal, you'd be sent to your home country where you were born to serve out your time. And if you were released and if you reoffended, that's the problem of that country. It's no longer a British problem. This is a proposed Labour Party policy.
So why is a dangerous rapist, as long as he's British, he's got a British passport, he's safer to roam our streets? Which generally shows it's nothing to do with public safety then, is it? This is nothing to do with public safety. How is it public safety?
It is, because it's reducing... It's reducing. There are 12% of the British prison population were born overseas. This is 10,422 foreign nationals. Prisons are already bursting at the seams. We only have 700 places left. Surely getting rid of 10,500 dangerous foreign criminals not only protects British citizens when they get out, but it alleviates the pressure on the prison system, and that can only be good for the British taxpayer.
I mean, I think that just from what you've said now, those few lines, it just points out, so many problems with our system. So if someone's been in the system for 7 years, 10 years, been in prison, and they've not been rehabilitated, no treatment has been carried, they've not, there's been no improvement in that. That just shows what a failure our criminal justice system is. And also, why are our prisons bursting at the seams. The point is, again, because governments, politicians don't actually want to do anything constructive about criminal justice, the easy solution is lock everyone up. And I think that's, we rely on prison too much.
Well,
so many people...
Part of the reason, Mr. Cole, and our prisons are so full, is we have 10,500 foreign-born criminals who've committed violent crimes who are in prison. So this policy specifically and directly targets prison overcrowding, dangerous criminals and equality within Britain. And it's a Labour policy. This is not Donald Trump. It's not even Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak. This is the Labour Party.
To be honest, when it comes to human rights or anything else, I don't think, to me personally, it makes a difference who proposed the policy. So again, I'm repeatedly saying it's a Labour policy. And I think that, that's why it gives us at least some hope. Maybe with Keir Starmer, former human rights lawyer or lawyer at least, and some of the other cabinet ministers he's selected, they might actually look at it more carefully. It might be slightly more nuanced policy than it would be if it was a Tory policy. So we have that slight hope. But otherwise, I don't think it makes a difference who the government is. The point is, if what we're doing, if there's going to be a blanket policy, anyone who serves more than 5 years, regardless of your life in the UK, anything, you will be deported automatically. That is something that I would oppose.
OK, Shoaib Khan, we'll have to leave it there. We've got a change of government, but we haven't got a change of position on the human rights of criminals. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, Chris Hope, you're still here in the studio. I know you were itching to get into that debate there, but I simply had to press on. Yeah. Is this an example, do you think, of how the human rights lawyers historically have always frustrated the Conservative Party? Now the Labour Party are about to get a taste of their own medicine.
Well, they might well do. I was going to ask that guest there, is it the case that we have lots of Brits overseas in prisons, and is it simply a revolving door? We even if they get even half that many sent overseas, will a lot come back and be repatriated to our penal system here? I'm never quite sure what the net gain might be by doing this, but it is a problem. And why are 12% of our inmates foreign nationals?
But when specifically pushed on the matter there, as an example, a hypothetical question, we have a dangerous foreign-born rapist. This government wants to get them back to their country. He said, no, we protect their human rights and allow them to, hopefully, not reoffend in Britain.
It's dogged Labour governments going back into the noughties. I mean, the issue of foreign national prisoners there, you couldn't send them back, and why can't we? Many people watching this will be wondering that question just now.
And I wonder if the human rights lawyers, the human rights industry, which for so long has frustrated the Conservatives, now, ironically, with a huge dollop of irony, might become a problem for this new Labour government. Chris Hope, excellent stuff. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. I'll have the latest from the United States, where some pretty wild conspiracy theories surrounding the attempted assassination of Donald Trump are knocking about. But first, it's your latest news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. The top stories this hour. We begin with some breaking news. 2 people have died and 2 children are in hospital following a house fire in Blackpool in Lancashire this morning. Local police confirmed a man and a woman in their 20s were killed, while 2 children are in a poorly condition. Also in the news today, MPs have been debating the King's speech in the Commons. A short while ago, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, promised national renewal after 14 years of chaos. It's after the King officially opened the new session of Parliament, setting out the government's planned programme of new laws. In total, 40 new pieces of legislation were announced. Meanwhile, more than 30 protesters have been arrested in central London over plans to disrupt the state opening of Parliament. 10 members of the group Youth Demand were detained in Westminster, while another 20 protesters were arrested a short distance from the Houses of Parliament. Police say they're being questioned on suspicion of conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. And police have released new images of a suspect wanted in connection with the shooting of a 9-year-old girl in East London. A gunman on a motorbike opened fire on a restaurant in Dalston on the 29th of May. The child's family says she remains in a critical condition. And the latest figures show inflation held at the Bank of England's 2% target last month. All eyes will now be on the central bank and whether it'll cut the interest rate this summer. The government says the data is welcome news, but added prices are still high because of the economic chaos they inherited from the Conservatives. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club. proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Before I hand you back to Martin, a quick look at the markets from me first. The pound buying you $1.3010 and €1.1897. The price of gold is £1,894 and 41 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently standing at 8,193 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say. Tell me what you think of Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, what they said in the Commons a short time ago. Just put a tweet out. They're slapping each other on the backs. They look like the best of pals. They're all chums. Where's the opposition? Read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Leicestershire and Quorn, the southbound A6 still closed off between the One Ash roundabout and Granite Way. A collision earlier today means we're still seeing queues. Coxbench in Derbyshire, the northbound A38 between Derby Road and the Hartshire roundabout in Ripley. That's part blocked. Queuing back toward Little Eaton Island and route to Kilburn queuing. That's due to an accident. Now, the earlier bump on the anti-clock M25, well, that's cleared in terms of any lane closures before the Dartford Tunnel. Still very slow, though, patchy queues back towards Darenth at Junction 2. And long queues heading toward London for the M20 in Kent. The earlier breakdown's gone from Ashford Junction 9 up towards the Maidstone services and Leeds Castle Junction 8. So all lanes open, but still very slow on the approaches there. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cloudier day across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow with some rain around, but another by and large fine day for England and Wales thanks to high pressure, and it is going to get a little hotter, particularly across the south and east. Further west though, we do have weather fronts encroaching, bringing thicker cloud at the moment to the west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So that thickening cloud will provide some outbreaks of rain, particularly later this evening and overnight, where actually the rain could turn heavy across the west of Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Elsewhere, most places fine and dry, some mist and fog patches, temperatures mostly holding up at 14 to 16 degrees. So quite a warm night, a fine start to Thursday for England and Wales. Some early mist and fog that should disappear. A few showers drifting up across North and West Wales, and a very wet start in western Scotland, but something a bit brighter along the east coast, but certainly cloudier than today. Dull and damp through the central belt to begin with, and quite a grey and damp morning across Northern Ireland as well. A few showers could drift into northwest England and across the north and west of Wales, but most of England and Wales having a fine start. A little bit of mist and fog early on, but that should tend to disappear pretty rapidly soon after rush hour, if not before. And then plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, eastern and southern England, South Wales as well. A cloudy day over northwest England, the odd shower possible here. Staying pretty damp on the west coast of Scotland and for Northern Ireland, but something a bit brighter across southern and eastern Scotland come the afternoon, where temperatures could creep up to 20 degrees. Further south, then, widely into the mid-20s, 28 possible in and around the capital. So a balmy summer's evening across the south on Thursday evening. Still a bit damp in western Scotland. The rain should be easing during the course of Thursday across Northern Ireland. The outlook is for more hot sunshine across England and Wales on Friday before things turn a little cooler and more showery during the weekend.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, later in the show, we'll discuss Queen Camilla, who, as well as being by her husband's side during the King's speech this morning, is also celebrating her 77th birthday today. Happy birthday, Mom. Now to the latest on who will become the new leader of the Conservative Party, and it's been reported that Dame Priti Patel will enter the race. Patel was the Home Secretary between 2019 to 2022, and it's been said that she's been urged to run by other Tory MPs. Well, I'm joined in the studio by the former Transport Minister, Kevin Foster. Welcome to the show, Kevin Foster, and I'm still got Chris Hope in the studio. We've got a clip on screen there. Can we show that again? I want your reaction to this, Kevin Foster. We see that clip. It's a short while ago after the debate in the House of Commons on the King's Speech. It's Rishi Sunak, who's now the leader of the opposition, and Sir Keir Starmer, and they're slapping each other on the back. They look like the best of friends. And is that really... We've got it on the screen now. Look, this is just from the Commons a short while ago. Look, they're the best of pals. They're laughing away. The new chumocracy.
I'll explain who's there for you, Martin. That's Rishi Sunak, Oliver Dowden, Sir Oliver Dowden, given knighthood in the dissolution honours with Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer. So the two top people in the two main parties, one of which in government. Some might say, why on earth are they doing that? Certainly Tory MPs who I know who lost their seats, Martin, in the election will be spitting tax at those images.
And Kevin, that's a good time to bring you in. They call Sir Keir Starmer Sir Flip-Flop. It looks to me like Rishi Sunak's already got his flip-flops on. He's got one foot on the beach. He looks like a man who's on his way out. He looks very relaxed, very chilled out, shaking hands, slapping on the back. What do you make of videos like that? I think it's going to make a lot of hard-working Tories who've been knocking on doors and losing their seats actually a bit cross.
Yeah, I think a lot of my members, activists, seeing that would just think, there's all for having a professional relationship between the two main parties, absolutely. But to be slapping people on the back, celebrating on a day that actually a lot of people, including me, will have been looking on thinking, could have been there myself. But for a slightly better performance, it must be said, from both Mr Sunak and Mr Dowden. But as you've touched on, Martin, Rishi Sunak is now on his way out. He quite clearly has said he'll be resigning fairly soon as leader of the party once the process for electing the new leader is set out and that person is selected. But, yeah, this is, watching that, I think Chris touched on it, it's not really the sort of thing you want to see, slapping on the backs and laughing and joking. This is supposed to be serious politics.
Can I ask, have you spoken to your leader since the election and you lost your seat?
Yeah, he rung me up on the Sunday, I think, to, in his words, apologise that he wasn't able to turn back the national tide. Well,
What do you say to him?
Well...
A bit late, Rishi.
Basically something along those lines, a little bit late. But look, it is what it is. To be fair to him, we were coming at the end of 14 years with all the arguing we'd seen, the lack of delivery on certain issues. Whoever it was, we'd been very unlikely to be winning.
And we can see that image there again of them slapping on the back. That brings us neatly on to, OK, so who's next? So you've written a piece today for GB News and you're firmly of the mind Priti Patel should be the next Conservative Party leader. Tell us why.
Look, I worked with Priti in the Home Office on some of the knottiest issues in things like migration, home affairs, all the issues we had around the balance around policing during COVID. And, she's someone who's absolutely determined to get things done. And, we've got to face the fact that for the next 18 months, not many people are going to be listening to us policy-wise, given the scale of the government's majority and the defeat we've just had. So she's someone who understands the party innately, can get the reforms in the Conservative Party that are needed, bring back basic discipline, ethics and competencies, which I think it's safe to say we've been lacking for the last 6 months, and then present a truly Conservative vision for this country as we approach the next general election.
Now, in terms of the betting odds, she's an outsider. It's the first time she's thrown a hat in the ring to be a potential leader, so that's novel. She's 8-1 at the moment with the bookies. Kemi Badenoch 6-4, Tom Tugendhat 5-1, more of a centrist. Suella outsider 14-1, James Cleverly 11-2, and Robert Jenrick 7-2. What can Priti do about the Nigel Farage problem? Because there is a Nigel Farage problem. He's nibbling away. He won't be quiet, and he sees himself as the natural successor of the actual Conservative movement. Do you neutralise him or do you absorb him?
Well, I suppose, Martin, I don't perhaps want to dwell too much on betting odds, given the experience we had during the recent election campaign around people putting bets on. But I think, actually, when we talk about the Farage problem, we actually need to talk about issues. Why is it that 8,000 people wanted to vote reform in Torbay? Why is it that people won't say? And it's not just because they like Nigel or they enjoy his show on GB News. It's because of issues. It's because of perceived failure to deliver on immigration, on crime. It's on tax. It's those sort of issues. We can tackle the issues, we can get the voters back.
But were they offering simple solutions to complex issues? I mean, the problem you got in government, or had in government, was that you know how hard it is to deal with small boats crisis or net immigration. Nigel Farage can chuck in a nice headline-grabbing policy which he'll never have to implement because he'll never be in government. And so people went for the easy solution. Your problem was you didn't communicate that's for the birds. This is how hard it is in government.
Well, you're right to say, Chris, that it's easy for a party that isn't going to form a government, either Reform or the Lib Dems or the Green Party, to chuck out anything at a general election. However, when we look like a disorganised rabble, it's very hard to push back on that. If we are organised, competent, effective, with real plans, and that we can show how we would deliver them to that group of voters, we can get them back. But if we just think it's about an individual, we'll make a mistake. We think it's about issues and delivering on those issues, that's where we start to reconnect with those voters.
If we talk specifically about the issue of immigration, both legal and illegal immigration, obviously, the Reform Party have made this the immigration election. Priti Patel was Home Secretary before. A lot of people say she didn't have the rosiest of records on both of those issues. What would be different this time around?
I think first the difference would be, one, in a leadership role, it gives you much more an ability to decide for yourself what the direction should be. And I can remember, so I've got some scars on my back from some of the battles with sector-based departments about why a visa wasn't the solution to every recruitment problem, and also sometimes with the Treasury about why actually investing in things like accommodation centres and sorting out our processing system was a way of cutting spending on asylum seekers, not increasing it. So I do think it's someone who can bring a clear Conservative direction to this, and ultimately not just on migration and on national security and on policing, vital for reform-based voters, but also the wider gambit of being able to appeal to people on basis of competence and wider economic issues.
Can I clarify, is she definitely standing, by the way? Because so far she hasn't commented, Kevin. Have you been put out there as an outrider, a Patel outrider?
It sounds to me like the kites are being flown.
Well, it's interesting to have that type of description. She usually doesn't need anyone to speak for her, that's for sure. But look, I haven't spoken to her in recent days, but I understand, I've seen some of the reports that she may well be putting in. Back in 2022, initially, I'd hoped she would run then. I'd obviously be very keen to see her enter the contest this time, give people a clear Conservative choice who wasn't involved in a lot of the mucking around of the last 2 years that cost us dearly at this election.
Well, I'd be very keen to see her in this studio, so go back and have a word. Thank you very much, Kevin Foster, former Tory MP, for joining us on GB News. Great stuff. Now, if you listen to some people, foreign governments were behind the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. I'm about to discuss some of the wildest conspiracy theories that are being posted on social media around those astonishing events. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we've got a story and a half to tell you and bring you now. Our very own GB News political correspondent, who we love very much, Catherine Foster, joins us in the studio, and she's smiling, but she wasn't smiling for the past few days.
Two of her sons, Matthew and Andrew, were reported missing in Bali.
I got a text from a friend saying, can you give us a call, a bit worried about them. Then spoke to a girl they'd befriended who was in Sweden, but they'd met on their travels. And she told me that they'd gone up the mountain. By the time I found out, they'd been missing for 30 hours. They'd gone up the mountain on the Tuesday night, British time. This was the Thursday morning, without a guide. And they'd told her it was really hard. And she told them to turn back, but they hadn't. And they'd sent screenshots from this app with this trail that they were following on the app, screenshots of the app in case there was a problem, and a Snapchat of Matthew avatar at the top. And she said, I know they made it to the top because I could see that his phone had nearly died. But the trail had actually closed many years ago. So the app, we will need to make sure that that gets taken off the app. But, you know, technology saved them in the end because it was the screenshots and it was the messages that they'd sent, but they should never have been without a guide.
But what were you doing during those 30 hours that Mum couldn't, when the phone died and Mum couldn't get in touch? Where were you? What were you up to?
Well, we were trying to figure out the best course of action because it started to pour with rain. The amount of rain created a river, like a stream.
Yeah.
We were like, oh,
yeah,
let's follow the stream downhill, and then the sun set, and we just had to like sleep in the bushes in the jungle.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, it's 4 days since Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt. And there are some pretty wild conspiracy theories circulating in the United States. An advisor to a major donor, the Democrats, apologised after suggesting that the incident was staged. And elsewhere, it's been claimed that foreign governments were behind the attack. It's even been said that it was planned by Republicans. What on earth is going on? Let's try and make some sense of that now. And I'm joined by the US political analyst, Eric Ham. Eric, always an absolute pleasure to have your company. It was an astonishing moment, one that has changed this election and could have changed all of political history. And now the rumours, the conspiracies going around are simply staggering. Tell us what's going on.
Well, right now, there is an investigation to actually try to find out the motives behind what led this 20-year-old individual to so brazenly attempt this assassination on the life of former President Donald Trump. Now, of course, in addition to that, there are reports from U.S. intelligence agencies that Iran was also planning to, or trying to plot an assassination of the former president. We're learning that they also provided that information to the campaign as well, and Secret Service certainly was aware of that. But what we do know is, at least right now, sources are saying that there was no collaboration between this 20-year-old suspected shooter and a possible plot by Iran to assassinate the former president.
Then, Eric, we also have accusations about the Secret Service being in on it, the local police force turning a blind eye to reports, blaming a sloped roof for being too dangerous. Then it was Jill Biden asking for diversity hires, so we had women who were no good at their job or too short or incompetent at the job. And then we've got some Democrats outrightly believing this is a false flag, that the entire thing was somehow fabricated for votes.
Well, I do know that already that there have been calls for the head of the Secret Service to actually appear before Congress to answer questions about what exactly happened, how was this able to happen, and what measures need to be put in place to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. It's very striking because, again, we're talking about the potential assassination of an ex-president. Something like this hasn't happened in more than 40 years. And right now we're getting very little information about that, including the fact of the health and actually what happened to Donald Trump. We're told that a bullet actually pierced his ear, but we don't have any medical records. We haven't heard from the attending physician who actually saw Donald Trump in the wake of this shooting. And so there's very little information that's out there right now. We see a bandage on the former president's ear while he's at his Republican convention, but still no more details in terms of his health, what actually happened. And more importantly, how is his health right now? And what exactly happened? Was it glass shard that actually shattered his ear, or was it an actual bullet? We just don't know at this time.
Eric Ham, we have a quick minute left. Donald Trump, of course, is due to speak tomorrow at the Republican National Convention. Do you think we'll see a different, more thoughtful Trump, or do you think it will quickly revert to form?
I think we will get a very clear detail of what we're going to hear and see from the ex-president based on what we know that his running mate will say tonight. And now there's been some red meat. There's been some outreach to the other side. We heard last night from Nikki Haley, but it's unclear what we're going to hear from Donald Trump beginning tomorrow night, which is why I think so many people will be tuning in.
And as you'd expect, Eric Ham has already turned the photographs of that attempted assassination into T-shirts and marketing and fundraising events. That's just what he does. Eric Ham, it's always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Thank you, and I hope to see much more of you ahead of November the 5th, the greatest show on earth. Eric Ham, thanks for joining us. Now, footage from the House of Commons shows Sir Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak and other senior figures from Labour and the Tories laughing and joking with each other. What are they playing at? They're meant to be the opposition. Rishi Sunak has just said, and Ed Davis just said, they will not oppose the Labour Party for the sake of it. Well, what's the point of them then? What's the point of opposition? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now it's time for your weather with Alex Deakin.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cloudier day across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow with some rain around, but another by and large fine day for England and Wales thanks to high pressure, and it is going to get a little hotter, particularly across the south and east. Further west though, we do have weather fronts encroaching, bringing thicker cloud at the moment to the west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So that thickening cloud will provide some outbreaks of rain, particularly later this evening and overnight, where actually the rain could turn heavy across the west of Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Elsewhere, most places fine and dry, some mist and fog patches, temperatures mostly holding up at 14 to 16 degrees. So quite a warm night, a fine start to Thursday for England and Wales. Some early mist and fog, that should disappear. A few showers drifting up across north and west Wales, and a very wet start in western Scotland, but something a bit brighter along the east coast, but certainly cloudier than today. Dull and damp through the central belt to begin with, and quite a grey and damp morning across Northern Ireland as well. A few showers could drift into northwest England and across the north and west of Wales, but most of England and Wales having a fine start. A little bit of mist and fog early on, but that should tend to disappear pretty rapidly soon after rush hour, if not before. And then plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, eastern and southern England, South Wales as well. A cloudy day over northwest England, the odd shower possible here. Staying pretty damp on the west coast of Scotland and for Northern Ireland, but something a bit brighter across southern and eastern Scotland come the afternoon, where temperatures could creep up to 20 degrees. Further south, then, widely into the mid-20s, 28 possible in and around the capital. So a balmy summer's evening across the south on Thursday evening. Still a bit damp in western Scotland. The rain should be easing during the course of Thursday across Northern Ireland. The outlook is for more hot sunshine across England and Wales on Friday before things turn a little cooler and more showery during the weekend.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley, Washington and Tyne and Wear. If you're heading for the Sunderland Highway, that's the eastbound A1231. Shut between the Galleries North Interchange through towards Windlass Lane Parkway for an overturned vehicle there. Queues anti-clock for the M25. Firstly, Junction 7, the M23 if you're heading towards Godstone Junction 6. In the roadworks, of course, delays, so stop-start. Anti-clock also on the M25. Queues about half an hour before the Dartford Tunnels. Not up by an earlier collision. Looking at the live cameras, the congestion to just after the Swanley interchange. That's Junction 3 for the M20. And speaking of the M20, if you're London bound in Kent, Ashford Junction 9 through towards Leeds Castle, the Maidstone services at Junction 8. Still a lane shut for a breakdown. Still stop-start in the approach. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
Oh, I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done. Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, the King's speech promises fairness and opportunity for all, according to Sir Keir Starmer. But with 16 mentions of the European Union and 0 mentions of Brexit, new equal pay laws for black ethnic minorities and workers' rights laws that could hammer small businesses. Is this really the case? We'll have full expert analysis. And housing was a massive theme in the speech, with the King outlining Labour's plans to get Britain building, pledging to reform planning procedures and accelerate house building across the country. Have the NIMBYs been overtaken by the YIMBYs? And there are claims that Prince Harry is scrambling for more sensational material as publishers are craving to release a paperback copy of Spare. Could more dirt be dished? That's all coming in your next hour. What's the show? Always a pleasure to have your company. Also coming in around about 15 minutes' time, I'll speak to Lee Evans from fact4eu.org. An astonishing new report has just been released exclusively to GB News that details the staggering levels of illegal immigration into 27 European Union member states, a cataclysmic failure to control the outside borders of the EU means that all those people are being funneled towards the French coast and our legal immigration system is being pummeled because of the EU's inability to control its own borders. You will not believe the numbers. You will not believe the size of this problem waiting over the horizon. Get in touch, send your views, gbnews.com/your say. But now it's time for your news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story today, MPs have been discussing the King's speech in the House of Commons this afternoon. And a short time ago, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, promised national renewal after 14 years of what he described as chaos. It comes after King Charles officially opened the new session of Parliament, setting out the government's planned programme of new laws. In total, 40 pieces of legislation were announced, with promises to get Britain building, deliver greater devolution pollution and enhance employment rights. The speech also proposed a football regulator, House of Lords reform and a plan to tackle organised immigration crime. Sir Keir Starmer says his government will solve problems, not exploit them.
The last King's Speech was the day when the veil of his choices slipped, and we all saw a party, his party, content to let our country's problems fester, content to push aside the national interest, as they focused almost entirely on trying to save their own skins. But I defy anyone on those benches or elsewhere to look at the ambition and purpose of our intent and not to receive a return to the serious business of government. No more wedge issues, no more gimmicks, no more party political strategy masquerading as policy.
Sir Keir Starmer, well, the now leader of the opposition, Rishi Sunak, vowed to hold the government to account on all its promises.
It is right to begin by congratulating the Prime Minister on his decisive victory in the election. He deserves the goodwill of all of us in this House as he takes on the most demanding of jobs in the increasingly uncertain world in which we now live. Now, the party opposite has successfully tapped into the public's desire for change. But they now must deliver change, and we on this side of the House will hold them accountable for delivering on the commitments that they made to the British people. In the national interest, we will not oppose for the sake of it, but when we disagree with the government, it is our responsibility as the opposition to say so.
Rishi Sunak. The economy and the latest figures show inflation held at the Bank of England's 2% target last month. All eyes now will be on whether or not it'll cut interest rates this summer. The government says the data is welcome news, but prices are still high because of the economic chaos inherited from the Conservatives. Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Chris Philp, accused Labour of shameless spin, though, and suggested the party will introduce what he's calling sneaky tax rises.
This stuff that Rachel Reeves has been saying, claiming that the fiscal position is worse than she expected, is obvious nonsense. The OBR obviously assessed our fiscal position. They published their own forecasts a few months ago that she obviously saw. And we've seen today's inflation figure staying down at 2%, on target, lower than the Eurozone, lower than the USA, growth top of the G7.
Chris Philp. Now, the family of a 9-year-old girl who was shot in East London say she may never walk or talk again. Detectives have released new images of the prime suspect 49 days after a lone gunman on a motorbike opened fire on a restaurant from the road. 3 men were sitting outside. They were hit by the gunfire but weren't seriously injured. The little 9-year-old girl remains in a critical condition. And it's feared 2 British men reported missing in Sweden may have been killed. Police have launched a double murder investigation after 2 bodies were found in a burnt-out car in Malmö on Sunday. Local media is reporting they were shot. Local police are still working to identify the victims. Here, a former army general has admitted disgraceful conduct of an indecent kind after being accused of sexual assault. James Roddice pleaded guilty to the lesser charge at Bulford Military Court in Salisbury. The court was told the complainant indicated she was content with the count. Roddice was made an MBE and also earned 2 Queen's Commendations for his service. He'll be sentenced in September. Traces of cyanide have been found in teacups inside a hotel room where 6 people were found dead in Thailand. Police say the 3 men and 3 women were likely poisoned by one of those who died in the hotel room in Bangkok, which was locked from the inside. Investigators say money may have been a motive after evidence showed financial transactions had been made between the group. Prisoners of war have been exchanged following an agreement between Ukraine and Russia. 95 soldiers from each side were returned, the Ukrainian men appearing emotional as they left the bus. If you're watching on television, you can see those pictures of them getting off the coach as they land on home soil. President Volodymyr Zelensky says all of the freed prisoners were from the armed forces. He also thanked the United Arab Emirates for its help in facilitating the deal. It's the 3rd such swap in 7 weeks. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now we start with the King's Speech and the new government's plans to make its mark after 14 years of Conservative rule. King Charles announced plans for 40 bills, the most at a state opening since 2005, and the speech included more than 1,400 words, the longest for 21 years. Well, I'm now joined by the new Climate Minister, Sarah Jones. Sarah, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for sparing some time to speak to us. Can I talk to you about Great British Energy? It's now been talked in on the King's Speech. It's now official. It's going to happen. I've been asking many a minister for a long time about these 650,000 green jobs that have been touted about it. What are the jobs? Where will they be? And how much will they pay?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm Minister for Industry and Decarbonisation. So industry and climate go together, and the whole of this King's Speech is all about growth. And we can't do that without industry and business working hand in glove. So that's a kind of really important starting point. Great British Energy is going to be a publicly owned institution based in Scotland. That's where its headquarters will be. And it will own, manage and operate green energy. So if you look around the world right now, there are countries in a race for who is going to provide the jobs of the future. And we know whether it's hydrogen, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's floating offshore wind, all these new green energies are going to provide jobs for the countries that get this right. So Great British Energy is about getting this right and about putting the right jobs and the right infrastructure across the country so that we can have that energy security, so we don't have to rely on Putin anymore, have the jobs in the areas where we've seen deindustrialisation in the past and we need really good, well-paid jobs, and have a system where we are not going to have that huge up and down of energy costs that we saw over the last couple of years because we'll have homegrown energy. It's a really powerful tool. And importantly, it sits alongside some other tools as well. So having an industrial strategy, having the National Wealth Fund, which is this partnership with the private sector, where every pound we spend, we want £3 from the private sector, and that is going to be about creating the industry that we need across the country. So all these tools are all targeted towards economic growth so we can put more money in people's pockets.
Sure, I get that. We heard all of that before you were elected into power. What I'm simply asking is, where will the jobs be? What will they pay? Like if I live, say, for example, in Nottingham, will there be jobs in Nottingham? What kind of jobs will they be and what will they pay?
So if you look at some of the documents that we put out before the election, there are a kind of regional mix of jobs, and it depends where you are. So you look at somewhere like South Wales, say, for example. You look at Port Talbot, the steel industry there. We know that there are, well, we are having huge conversations with Tata, who own the steel company, to look at what happens to those jobs. But if you look at that area, if you look at things like what you could do with a port, what you could do with floating offshore wind, how you could put a whole raft of different industries, if we get this right, into that area, that's what we want to do. So it means bringing people together, it means talking to industry, where there is investments that are hard, that are a big risk for industry to make, maybe we can help along the way, where there are partnerships where we can bring people together, maybe we can help along the way. With Great British Energy, in some cases, we'll be generating some of the energy that we'll need as well, so we'll help in that way. But it's all about creating jobs for people. If you look at the gaps we already have as well, look at who we're bringing in, you know, from other countries where we're needing to bring in engineers, welders, because we haven't got enough of our own people. So it's all about skills as well. We have to train up those people to do those jobs.
But there are also going to be a lot of jobs lost. For example, in the North Sea industry, already companies are fleeing the idea of investing in Britain if they're going to be looking at down the barrel. An 85% windfall tax from the Labour Party's policy seems to be just stop oil. But what people really care about are their utility bills. So Great British Energy, fantastic. It's gleamy, it's new, it shines. When are our bills going to come down?
So we've said by the end of the Parliament the bills will come down £300, but it's more important than that, because you know the way that bills shot up and now they're coming back down again. That's what we need to avoid happening in the future, and that's what we will avoid. And just on your point about oil and gas, it's really important. You know, this is real people, we're talking about real jobs. We've seen the number of people working in oil and gas industry halve over the last decade. We want to be creating jobs for the future. We know that oil and gas will go down over time, although we're going to rely on it for some time to come, let's be honest. But we have an opportunity to create the new jobs that everybody else is fighting to create across the world. If you look at what America's doing, you look at what Europe's doing, they're all creating incentives for business to come and invest. And you've got to look at our geography as well. We're an island, so we can make the most of our incredible infrastructure. So we can have carbon capture,
but we could make
floating oil, floating offshore wind.
Sarah, with respect, we could make the most of our North Sea oil resources, but Ed Miliband blocked them on the first day in the job.
So all the existing licences continue. Nothing changes with the existing licences. It's the new licences that will be stopped. And we know we have to do these things because of the climate situation.
We don't have to. America hasn't.
The point of this Labour government, the whole point of it is to drive economic growth. So we're going to use every lever we possibly can to create those jobs of the future. We've got to look to new technologies. We've got to look to AI. We've got to look to the changing technologies of the future, and we've got to go for those. And that's why we've been talking to industry, to business for the last 4 years since Keir was elected. We've been having those conversations time and time again, so that there's no surprises, that they know what's coming, and that we know we can work with them. It's why Rachel Reeves has spent so much time building those relationships, because they'll be key to getting those new jobs.
OK, Sarah, I'm joined in the studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. He has a question for you.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for taking the question. Just a quick one. Your plans of onshore wind farms and better connectivity with the grid. What do you say to communities who don't want wind farms next to them or pylons? I mean, would you live next door to a wind farm or a pylon? Do you understand why they might fight them?
Yeah. So look, this is a really important question because it goes to the heart of what we're trying to do. We say on the one hand, we're trying to create jobs and we're trying to create growth, but we also want to do that. We want to do that alongside people. We don't want to be forcing things on people in a way that that really doesn't give them any benefits. And it's why Rachel Reeves has been really clear. If you are taking infrastructure in your community that we need as a country, then you should get some benefits from that. You should, whether it's cheaper bills or whatever structures we put in place, you should get a benefit. But the second point I would just make quickly is we were very clear about these plans in the election campaign, and that's what people have voted for, because we have to turn the country around and get us to a point where we're growing the economy. We have to do that, and I think that's what people have accepted. That's what people voted for in the election. But of course, we've got to take people with us. Of course we have, because these things are big pieces of infrastructure that we'll need to be having if we're going to thrive as a country. So we want people to get benefits for them too.
OK, Sarah Jones, the bell of Big Ben has tolled. Seems an opportune moment to leave it there. Climate Minister Sarah Jones, thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. And I'm now joined by the former Labour MP, Bill Rammell. Bill, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. I want to talk to you about Brexit, Bill. I love talking to you about Brexit. In the King's speech today, guess how many times Brexit is mentioned? 0. Guess how many times the European Union is mentioned? 16. 16 mentions the European Union, 0 mentions of Brexit. Can I ask you, Bill Rammell, is Brexit now a dirty word with the Labour Party?
No, it's not. We accept the outcome of the referendum. There's no return to the European Union. There's no return to the single market, and there's no return to the customs union. It's also the case there's no legislation within the King's speech around European Union, but there is a commitment, and actually if you look at the polling evidence, it's what most people want to see happen, that we develop a closer working relationship in our mutual national interest with the European Union. So, for example, and particularly working together on defence and security cooperation, which, given the threats that we face across the globe, and given some of the risks with, if President Trump is elected, and some of his critical comments about NATO, one, we're going to have to turn that round and ensure we do have a strengthened NATO, but also we're going to need to work with our partners in the European Union on defence and security cooperation. That's in their interests, and it's certainly in our interests.
OK, I'm joined by Chris Hope in the studio. He's got a question for you.
Bill, you're a veteran, former Labour MP, forgive me. Do you see that there's video of shortly after the King's speech, we saw Rishi Sunak chatting with Sir Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner chatting, you see it there on the screen now, with Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Ministers and Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, respectively, and behind them, Jeremy Hunt chatting away with Rachel Reeves, former and current Chancellors together. It's a complete chumocracy, this bunch, isn't it? I mean, we heard earlier from Rishi Sunak saying he won't oppose for opposition's sake. We heard the same language from Ed Davey. I mean, what on earth have voters got here? A kind of national government where everyone agrees on stuff?
Now, there's huge divisions between the parties. But look, you know, politicians, despite their differences, are human beings. And of course, people talk across the party divide. Because, you know, you want engagement and you want people where they can to cooperate and work together. But be in no doubt, there are huge differences between the parties. And what really struck me about the King's speech was the real sense of momentum. 40 separate pieces of legislation, dwarfing the number of bills that came forward under the last Tory government, because they were so divided, they couldn't bring forward legislation because they couldn't guarantee to get it through the House. So there's real momentum, real change, but of course we talk to each other.
Are you happy, Bill, with the entire King's speech? There's one bill in there which appears to allow prosecutions of veterans in Northern Ireland to go forward again. I mean, is that something you're happy with?
I think overall, the bill is the King's speech is a very impressive one, real momentum. I think we're going to want to see the devil will be in the detail on that piece of legislation. I think this was the previous commitment by the last Conservative government to effectively, for all time, exonerate people. And in a sense, that puts them above the law. But also, we need to see the detail of this piece of legislation to ensure that previous troops are protected.
Well, Bill, the detail is here. I've got the document in my hand right here, and it says very clearly in the King's speech proposed by Sir Keir Starmer that we will repeal immunity, especially in Northern Ireland. This is Corbynism. This is exactly what Jeremy Corbyn did. When I was knocking on doors in 2019, people were putting signs on their doors saying, warning, veteran lives here. Do not knock if you're from the Labour Party. This is Corbynism wrapped up in Starmer's new King's speech.
It's not Corbynism in any way, shape or form. And I think the concept of a blanket immunity is a risky one. We need to be proportionate. There needs to be safeguards. And when we get to the detail of the legislation, I think that will become clear. Even if it's not in the draft, I'm certain under amendments that will be put forward, not just by the opposition, but by Labour members as well, we'll get this right. But I think the concept of blanket immunity for former troops sets a very, very dangerous precedent about the conduct of military operations, and that's what we're seeking to tackle.
So Bill Rammer, what that says in plain language is the human rights lawyers will be able to pick apart these historical cases. They'll be able to get veterans from Northern Ireland before a court of law for grievances from many decades ago. It's precisely the same thing as before. Just admit it. This is the same.
Look, I was Minister of State for the Armed Forces in the last Labour government, and I spent time and effort resisting the worst kind of human rights lawyers who were bringing spurious claims against our troops. And it's right that any government does that. But the concept of blanket immunity, it sends out a signal about what is acceptable conduct in military operations that I don't think we want to countenance. And that's what this piece of legislation is trying to tackle.
OK, Bill Rummel, well answered, robust question. And thank you very much for joining us. It's always a delight to have your company. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, still plenty of time to grab your chance to win £30,000 in the Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize of the year, and it's totally tax-free. What will you do with all of that extra dough? Well, here's how you could win the lot.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Guess again. Now, a new report claims that the European Union is to blame for this country's illegal migration crisis. I'll speak to the writer of that report after this. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War, restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 5:26 now to a report that shows illegal immigration to the European Union has more than doubled in just 5 years. And the study claims that the blame for the UK's illegal migrant crisis lies solely with the European Union. Let's break those figures down for you. Illegal migration to the EU went up from almost 628,000 in 2019 to more than 1.265 million in 2023, and that's an increase of over 101%. Germany detected the most illegal arrivals in that time with 2.15 million. Next on the list was Greece, and Hungary and France also had more than 1 million migrants. And wait for this, a whopping 82% of illegal migrants in the European Union last year were male. Now, this independent study was produced by the British think tank facts4eu.org, which is an affiliate of the Campaign for an Independent Britain. And I'm joined now by Lee Evans, who's the chairman of facts4eu.org. Lee, welcome to the show. An astonishing report, simply staggering, and a great line that you pull out of this is that you solely blame the continued illegal migrant crisis we have in the United Kingdom on the EU's inability to control its own borders.
That's right. I think it's very difficult to see it any other way if you look at our report. This report, by the way, it came about from a fairly innocuous document produced by the EU Commission Statistics Agency. And whenever those documents look like they're innocuous, they get our interest. And so my team then accessed the data, dived right into the detail, and hence the report, which we provided exclusively in advance to GBNews. And the reason we did that is because GBNews has been unafraid of covering these types of subjects for years now.
So I'm very, very flattered to have that. But let's get back to the real concern here. If we've got over 1.25 million men flooding into, 82% of them flooding into the European Union, and they're able just to wander throughout that entire area, then inexorably they're ending up on the French coast. Looking ahead, Lee, to the government, we've just been sworn in on the King's speech today. Do you think that that plan that they're offering will in any way deter this? Or do you think that we're looking at an even bigger problem coming to our shores?
I think the latter, Martin, if I'm honest. We're non-partisan, as you know. We deal in facts, and we tend not to deal in forecasts. We leave that to the Remain or Rejoiner side of things. But if you look at the overall numbers, Martin, they are quite staggering. And I can give you just a few extra examples. In the last 12 years, the EU has detected 10 million illegal migrants. Now, I choose my words carefully. Detected. That doesn't mean that is the total. It just means those are the ones that they found. So that's an extraordinary number over the last 12 years. But what was particularly interesting, which you highlighted at the start of this segment, was the increase over the last few years, the doubling in 5 years. Now, that shows that despite all of the concerns about illegal immigration in the EU, which is very similar to the concerns the GB audience will have in the UK, despite those concerns, the EU seems unable to gain control of its borders. Now, the obvious implication of that is that a proportion, at the very least, a proportion of these illegal migrants will come to the UK. And the more there are in the EU, all things being equal, the more probably will come to the UK. So if you look at the first 12 days of Keir Starmer, his premiership, from his first day when he announced Rwanda was to be scrapped, there's been nigh on 1,200 migrants that have crossed. I know you've reported that. So that gives some indication. The second thing, obviously, that GBNews viewers and listeners will probably be aware of is that we're looking at record numbers already this year. They're up by 12% based on previous years, and previous years were bad enough. So it seemed reasonable to us to look at the source. Where is this coming from? And they're all coming from the EU, all of them. So the more porous the EU's borders are, and the more illegal migrants they allow in, the greater the possibility that our numbers of illegal boat migrants will just carry on going up and up and up.
OK, we have to leave it there. It's an excellent report, and thank you so much for your work. I know you do lots and lots of reports. Get onto those, facts4eu.org. Got a great Twitter account all over social media. Thank you for giving that exclusive to us, Lee Evans. Always an absolute delight. Thank you, my friend. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including claims that Prince Harry is scrambling for more sensational material. As publishers are craving to release a saucy paperback copy.
I'm pleased you liked my hometown.
But first, your latest news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. The headlines this hour. MPs have been debating the King's speech in the Commons. A short while ago, the Prime Minister promising national renewal after 14 years of chaos. It's after King Charles officially opened the new session of Parliament, setting out the government's planned programme of new laws. Ahead of the proceedings, more than 30 protesters were arrested in central London over plans to disrupt the state opening of Parliament. 10 members of the group were detained in Westminster. Another 20 protesters were arrested a short distance from the Houses of Parliament. Police say they're being questioned on suspicion of conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. And police have released new images of a suspect wanted in connection with the shooting of a 9-year-old girl outside a restaurant in East London. A gunman on a motorbike fired shots at the restaurant on the 29th of May. The child's family says she remains in a critical condition. And it's feared 2 British men reported missing in Sweden may have been killed. Police have launched a double murder investigation after 2 bodies were found in a burnt-out car in Malmö at the weekend. Local media is reporting they were shot. The authorities are still trying to identify the victims. And here, the latest figures show inflation held at the Bank of England's 2% target last month. All eyes now on whether or not it'll cut the interest rate in the coming months. The government says the data is welcome news, but added prices are still high because of the economic chaos inherited from the Conservatives. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Quick look at the figures for you, first of all. The pound buying in $1.3004 and €1.1899. The price of gold is £1,892.31 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed at 8,187 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And cheers, Polly. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay. I read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. So really getting you going about the chumocracy in the Commons. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cloudier day across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow with some rain around, but another by and large fine day for England and Wales thanks to high pressure. And it is going to get a little hotter, particularly across the south and east. Further west there we do have weather fronts encroaching, bringing thicker cloud at the moment to the west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So that thickening cloud will provide some outbreaks of rain, particularly later this evening and overnight, where actually the rain could turn heavy across the west of Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Elsewhere, most places fine and dry, some mist and fog patches, temperatures mostly holding up at 14 to 16 degrees. So quite a warm night, a fine start to Thursday for England and Wales. Some early mist and fog, that should disappear. A few showers drifting up across north and west Wales and a very wet start in western Scotland, but something a bit brighter along the east coast, but certainly cloudier than today. Dull and damp through the central belt to begin with, and quite a grey and damp morning across Northern Ireland as well. A few showers could drift into northwest England and across the north and west of Wales, but most of England and Wales having a fine start. A little bit of mist and fog early on, but that should tend to disappear pretty rapidly soon after rush hour, if not before. And then plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, eastern and southern England, South Wales as well. A cloudy day over northwest England, the odd shower possible here. Staying pretty damp on the west coast of Scotland and for Northern Ireland, but something a bit brighter across southern and eastern Scotland come the afternoon, where temperatures could creep up to 20 degrees. Further south, though, widely into the mid-20s, 28 possible in and around the capital. So a balmy summer's evening across the south on Thursday evening. Still a bit damp in western Scotland. The rain should be easing during the course of Thursday across Northern Ireland. The outlook is for more hot sunshine across England and Wales on Friday before things turn a little cooler and more showery during the weekend.
The latest GB News travel.
And a very good afternoon to you. My name is Johnny Ratner. Big problems continue in Leicestershire to the south of Loughborough this evening. The A6 remains shut southbound off the One Ash roundabout at Corn at the scene of a collision. In Shropshire, just south-east of Lyddham, the A489 remains closed between Plowden and Hordley. That's following a collision. And in central London, now various road closures around Westminster remain in place. Let me just update you. So the Mall, Horse Guards and St James Park are all closed. However, Constitution Hill, Whitehall and Parliament Square are now back open. Totteridge Common in North London at Barnet Gate, that's closed following a collision. And in Devon, just south of Tavistock, the A386 shut in Horrobridge and Whitchurch following a two-vehicle collision. Severe delays on the Piccadilly line in London out of Acton Town to Hounslow Central. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, locals won't be able to block new housing under new Labour plans. Keir Starmer has warned that his government will consult on how, not if, development should take place as part of his pledge to take the brakes off Britain. Well, I'm rejoined in the studio now by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. So, Chris, the era of the NIMBYs about to be replaced by the era of the YIMBYs.
That's what the government wants, and Keir Starmer has said, I'm a YIMBY. Now, what that means is yes in my backyard, rather than a NIMBY, no in my backyard. That's where he thinks he can... He's trying to get a mood behind building more properties. There's no question the government feels they've got to try and get communities to recognise they've got to allow more building to get to their 350,000 new homes a year target, up by about 100,000 or so from what the Tories did in government, I should say. The way they'll do this, they'll republish with a new requirement to allow building the National Planning Policy Framework, the planning rule book for planners. So if an idea comes up for some new development, the planners look at it and say, well, is it allowed? And if there's a presumption for building there, it will happen. They're looking at building in the so-called grey belt, which is parts of the green belt, which aren't very nice, waste ground, garages, former garages, car parks, that kind of thing, within the green belt. They want to get more homes built. I think anybody would recognise that, particularly if you've got children in their early 20s. Everyone wants all children to get, kids as they grow up, to get onto the housing ladder. Here's an example of why they think that's right. I do keep asking ministers, I asked Sarah Jones there, your guest earlier, would you allow planning or building near you, in this case a windmill or a wind farm or maybe a pylon? Because it's all very well in Whitehall saying, well, why can't that happen? Let's build there. But if you live next to these developments and if you feel they're not in keeping coping with the area you're living in, you will fight them. And is there a moral duty not to oppose them is the question.
And Chris Hope, there have already been people going through the social media history of Labour MPs and ministers, and a lot of them actually in the past, they were NIMBYs too. Thanks, Chris. I'm joined now by the head of policy at Britain Remade, Sam Dimitriou. Sam, welcome to the show. So the era of the NIMBY is over, it seems, to replace by the era of the YIMBY. The former Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, though, in the Commons earlier on, said this: a system that does not allow locals to have a say is unfair. What's your take?
So I think under the proposals put forward today, there is still going to be a local say in terms of how the housing itself is delivered. You know, for instance, locals could be able to insist on things like how the design of the buildings, whether they're all very, very tall and then a lot of green space around, or whether you have a more of a gentler form of density. So there is still a role for local people, but I think what we have to recognise is that Britain hasn't built enough homes for a very, very, very long time, and we've built up a massive, massive deficit. Result, house prices, rents, they're through the roof and they're not affordable to the vast majority of the population anymore. And we need to bring that down by building more homes, but particularly building them in the right places. The parts of Britain which have the best job markets, where there are the best opportunities for work, and where, you know, prices are telling you that we need to build more homes here.
OK, Sam, I'm joined in the studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. He's got a question for you.
But Sam, in defence of NIMBYs, I'm not trying to defend them, but at least understand where they come from. If we are allowing net migration to run at 200,000, 250,000 a year for 10 years, as the Treasury says, then all you're doing is building new homes for migrants arriving here. I mean, under the Tory policy, it was bananas, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. At least this is NIMBY, and then maybe you understand why that happened. But do you not understand the point? I mean, surely planning reform should come alongside controlling that migration too.
So I think population growth definitely has a role to play in housing affordability, but I think we have to remember that even if net migration was at zero or it was negative, we would still be far off the amount of homes we need to build. And I think you know, it's quite easy to just say, well, if we didn't have any immigration, we wouldn't need any homes at all, but that's just not true. And so, sure, have the debate about migration, but also talk about the other factors in that drive house prices, whether that's to places where they have better job opportunities. I don't think it's right that, you know, we have migration into the UK, but we also have migration across the UK. And at the moment, part of the problem is you can't move to take up a new job in different cities because you'll end up worse off, and that has to change.
Sam, don't you think the prospect of an entire new town just being dumped next to another town is for the birds? The idea that locals is going to roll over and allow this is a fantasy.
So, I mean, if you look at the history of new towns, there was never really an easy case where people just said, OK, sure, fine. Famously, Lewis Silkin, the planning minister under the Attlee government, who was building Stevenage, his exhaust pipe, in his gas tank, to try and send him away and send him packing. But ultimately that did get built. And I think there are going to have to be some fights and there are going to have to be some arguments. But the potential with things like new towns, particularly if you build them in the right location, for instance, where there are really, really good transport links that are being untapped, then you can create a lot of winners and you can reward locals who otherwise would be objecting. Maybe they get new GP surgeries, maybe they get better shops, maybe they also can benefit from other things like more economic opportunity.
Well, let's see what the political fallout of this is, because I suspect a lot of these already quite dense Labour constituencies won't be the areas where these houses or new towns or whatever the developments are going to be built. They'll be built in Lib Dem and Conservative areas. This one, I think, will roll on and on. But Sam Dimitriou, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Fascinating stuff. Now, coming up, there are claims that Prince Harry is scrambling for more sensational material. Publishers are craving to release a paperback copy of Spare. More dirt being dished. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
A new report suggests that Prince Harry is lonely in California and he's considering returning to Britain despite a seismic falling out with his father and his brother.
But the question we're asking this morning is whether Meghan would come with her Prince Charming or whether Harry would perhaps be more welcome here if he came solo.
Like Kinsey, we'll go to Kinsey Schofield live now in LA. Kinsey, we've got lots of time to talk about this and speculate this. We've got about 6 minutes or so to talk. But what's behind all of this? Where are these thoughts coming from?
They're coming from royal author Hugo Vickers, and I don't know if you're familiar with Mr. Vickers, but he's written over 30 books about the British royal family. And he told The Sun that Prince Harry will ultimately return to the UK with his tail between his legs. He described the Duke of Sussex as angry and says Harry is genuinely petrified of losing his wife, Meghan Markle. When asked his predictions for where Harry and Meghan will be in the next 20 years, Vickers told The Sun, I think he'll come home, explaining, I think Harry will come home, and if he comes home, we must be very nice to him because he won't particularly want to. He's quite angry, suggesting that he would be coming home solo. Vickers also said that Prince Harry looks slightly petrified of Meghan Markle and that King Charles has left the door wide open for Harry's return if and when he does decide to come back.
I can only imagine the culture shock that Prince Harry has faced arriving there. This is a kid that has grown up in castles.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 5:49, the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Prince Harry is reportedly scrambling for yet more sensational material as publishers are craving a paperback version of his memoir, Spare. However, given that his family have been keeping at arm's length since his infamous interview with Oprah Winfrey, would he have enough material left to satisfy his publishers? And meanwhile, the Prince and Princess of Wales have been leading the well-wishers to Queen Camilla, who turns 77 today. Well, I'm now joined by the royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, welcome to the show. Let's start with Spare. Will there be more dishing of the dirt, do you think, in the paperback version?
Well, now, this is a huge question. I do have to say it because normally, I mean, it was a bestseller. There's no question about it. It was also, in my opinion, extremely unwise for him to have written it, and I think he himself might even have come to that conclusion. I say this because very often when there's a bestseller, within 6 months or a year, you'll get it in paperback from the hardback. There's been no paperback. Now, with reference to the material, we specifically know, because Harry gave an interview with the journalist Brownie Gordon, where he talked of having cut 400 pages from Spare because it contained material that, well, he thought that others might find unacceptable. But considering the material that was actually in it and also the interviews that he gave, this, in fact, absolutely infuriated William. As you know, there was an alleged attack physically by William on Harry, and also we know his criticism of Queen Camilla led, it is reported, to the Sussex's eviction from Frogmore Cottage, which was their home in Britain. I mean, it has caused an enormous amount of trouble. If he were to do anything more at all, and especially now, I mean, at this time when two senior royals are seriously ill, I think it would be unforgivable. But what he did was shameful then. No wonder the publishers want to make more money. But I do think that the Sussexes, if they even remotely careful of their reputation, would be very, very ill-advised to touch anything of the kind at the moment.
OK, Richard Fitzwilliams, it's all enough to make Queen Camilla have a drink. But that's OK, it's her birthday today, 77.
Absolutely, and I think that she's, putting it mildly, she's earned it. And of course, actually commemorating this at the state opening of Parliament, where you've got the magnificent show and you've got the importance of such an event to our constitution, and also you've got, of course, her supporting King Charles, which is what she's done absolutely brilliantly for so many years, and most particularly in these very, very difficult months. And it's so wonderful to see the King at so many events, and hopefully at more. And as you know, they're planning to go to Samoa for the Chogam in October, and thereafter to Australia. So I think we must all wish Queen Camilla a very, very happy birthday. Thank her for the charitable work that she's been doing for so many important charities, whether it is literacy or domestic abuse or sufferers from sexual abuse or osteoporosis. I mean, she's an absolutely remarkable person. If anyone has deserved, she has at a difficult time.
OK, Richard Fitzwilliams, we have to leave it there. Happy birthday, Her Majesty. Now then, I've got a few of your says let's go through before the end of the show. We showed an extraordinary video of Rishi Sunak, Sir Keir Starmer, chumming up to each other in Westminster earlier on. It certainly rattled your cages. Nigel says this: the leaders of Labour and the Conservatives laughing, joking, patting each other on the back. Why are you surprised? They are two cheeks of the same. We can guess the rest on that one. Darren says this: the left and the right in British politics are wings of the same bird. More polite there, Darren. Nothing is going to change. They are all the same. And this was demonstrated by all in this chumocracy video. However, Nelly doesn't agree. He's got no problem with it. Nelly says, I voted reform. Seeing MPs treating each other like human beings is a welcome and refreshing change, especially in light of what's happened to Donald Trump. Now, that's it from me. Jews & Co. is up next. Now, don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's breakfast with Stephen and Ellie, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. And then Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. And I'll be back at 3 o'clock tomorrow. In fact, I'll be back at 7 o'clock tonight. I'm covering for Nigel Farage. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Thanks for your company. Now it's your weather with Alex Deakin.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Cloudy a day across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow with some rain around, but another by and large fine day for England and Wales thanks to high pressure. And it is going to get a little hotter, particularly across the south and east. Further west there we do have weather fronts encroaching, bringing thicker cloud at the moment to the west of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So that thickening cloud will provide some outbreaks of rain, particularly later this evening and overnight, where actually the rain could turn heavy across the west of Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Elsewhere, most places fine and dry. Some mist and fog patches. Temperatures mostly holding up at 14 to 16 degrees. So quite a warm night. A fine start to Thursday for England and Wales. Some early mist and fog that should disappear. A few showers drifting up across north and west Wales, and a very wet start in western Scotland, but something a bit brighter along the east coast, but certainly cloudier than today. Dull and damp to the central belt to begin with, and quite a grey and damp morning across Northern Ireland as well. A few showers could drift into northwest England and across the north and west of Wales, but most of England and Wales having a fine start. A little bit of mist and fog early on, but that should tend to disappear pretty rapidly soon after rush hour, if not before. And then plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, eastern and southern England, South Wales as well. A cloudy day over northwest England, the odd shower possible here. Staying pretty damp on the west coast of Scotland and for Northern Ireland, but something a bit brighter across southern and eastern Scotland come the afternoon, where temperatures could creep up to 20 degrees. Further south, though, widely into the mid-20s, 28 possible in and around the capital. So a balmy summer's evening across the south on Thursday evening. Still a bit damp in western Scotland. The rain should be easing during the course of Thursday across Northern Ireland. The outlook is for more hot sunshine across England and Wales on Friday before things turn a little cooler and more showery during the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. Problems in Leicestershire continue southeast of Loughborough. A serious accident closes the A6 southbound through Corn. In Shropshire, just east of Bishop's Castle, the A489 remains shut. Been ploughed in and orderly following a serious collision. And in central London, various closures remain in place around Parliament Square, including the Mall, Horse Guards, Birdcage Walk and St James Park, due to the state opening of Parliament. On the M20 in Kent, the left lane of 2 is shut London-bound, 9 to 8 near Ashford, where a lorry's broken down. There are long anti-clockwise queues on the Kent stretch of the M25 towards the Dartford tunnels following an earlier collision. In Devon, south of Tavistock, the A386 shut between Horrobridge and Whitchurch following a 2-vehicle collision. And on London Underground, there are severe delays on the Piccadilly line out of Acton Town to Hounslow Central and no service Hounslow Central to Heathrow. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you